Jake Miller's heart stopped when he heard the elevator ding at midnight. He was on the 47th floor of Hartwell Technologies, pushing his cleaning cart down the executive hallway. His 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, was asleep on the leather couch in the conference room behind him, wrapped in his jacket. The babysitter had canceled again. He had no choice but to bring her to work, just for tonight, just until his shift ended at 6 a.m. But the elevator meant someone was coming, at midnight, on the executive floor. Jake grabbed the cart and rushed toward the conference room, but he was too late. The doors opened, and Rachel Hartwell stepped out. Not just any executive. The CEO. The woman who owned the entire building. The woman whose face was on the cover of Fortune magazine last month. She stopped when she saw him. Her eyes moved from Jake to the open conference room door, where Sophie's small form was visible on the couch. "You brought a child into my building." Her voice was cold, but something in her expression wasn't anger. It was something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "After hours, into my private conference room." Jake's mouth went dry. He was about to lose everything. His job, his benefits. The custody arrangement with his ex-wife specifically stated he needed stable employment. If he lost this job, he'd lose Sophie. "Miss Hartwell, I can explain." "Conference room, now." She walked past him, heels clicking on the marble floor. Her hands were shaking. Jake followed, his pulse hammering. Sophie stirred but didn't wake. Rachel stood by the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. When she turned to face him, there was genuine worry in her eyes. Not the cold executive he'd seen in company meetings. Something was wrong, something bigger than a janitor breaking rules. "What's your name?" "Jake Miller, ma'am. I'm one of the night janitors. I've worked here for 3 years, and I swear this never—" "I'm going to ask you something." She cut him off, her voice tight. "And I need you to understand that your answer determines everything. For both of us." Jake had no idea what she meant. He just wanted to grab Sophie and leave before security arrived. Rachel stepped closer, and he could see the exhaustion in her face, the way her jaw was clenched, the desperate calculation behind her eyes. "How much do you love your daughter?" The question caught him completely off guard. "What? Would you do anything to keep her?" Rachel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Would you lie? Would you pretend? Would you let strangers believe something that isn't true if it meant she stayed with you?" Jake's throat tightened. "Of course I would. She's everything." Rachel nodded slowly, like she'd just made a decision that terrified her. "Then I need you to listen very carefully. Because in the next 60 seconds, I'm going to make you an offer. And if you say no, you walk out of here tonight and never come back. But if you say yes—" She paused, and for just a moment, Jake saw something crack in her expression. Genuine fear. "If you say yes, both our lives change forever. And there's no going back." "I don't understand. Pretend I'm your wife," Rachel said quietly. "Starting tomorrow, in front of everyone who matters, or pack your things tonight." The room felt like it was closing in. Jake looked at Sophie, sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that their entire lives were about to change. "Why?" Jake managed. Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went even paler. "Because someone very dangerous is trying to take everything from me. And you're the only person in this building who has something to lose just as badly as I do." She looked at him with an expression that was part desperation, part steel resolve. "I need an answer, right now." Jake's mind raced. This was insane. Illegal, probably. Definitely wrong. But when he looked at Sophie, he remembered the letter from his ex-wife's lawyer last week. Jennifer wanted full custody. She'd hired a private attorney. She claimed Jake's unstable work schedule made him unfit. One more strike against him, and the judge might listen. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Rachel pulled out her phone and opened a document. "My ex-husband filed a lawsuit 3 days ago. He's claiming I'm mentally unstable and unfit to run this company. The board votes in 72 hours on whether to remove me as CEO. I need to prove I have a balanced life, a family, stability. And you think You're a single father working night shifts to provide for your daughter. You're devoted, reliable, exactly what I need. She swiped to another screen. I'll pay you $50,000 up front. Another $150,000 when this is over in 6 weeks. Your daughter will attend Rosewood Academy, fully paid. You'll move into my penthouse. You'll appear at board meetings, investor dinners, and court proceedings as my husband. Jake's head was spinning. $200,000. Or I call security right now and you're fired for policy violations. Your employment record shows termination for cause. You explained to a judge why you lost your stable job. The threat hung in the air between them. Sophie made a small sound in her sleep, and Jake's chest tightened. How would this even work? My lawyer will brief you tomorrow. We'll create a backstory, sign a contract, keep this arrangement private and professional. Rachel's voice was steadier now, back in business mode. 6 weeks. That's all I need. Then you walk away with enough money to fight any custody battle and never worry about rent again. Jake looked at his daughter one more time, at her worn sneakers that were getting too small, at the jacket that was supposed to be his winter coat but spent most nights keeping her warm, at the future he couldn't give her on his salary. Okay, he said. I'll do it. Rachel's shoulders dropped slightly, relief flashing across her face. My driver will pick you up tomorrow at noon. Bring everything you own. We start immediately. She walked toward the door, then paused. And Jake, if you tell anyone the truth about this arrangement, the deal is off and you're finished. Understood? Understood. After she left, Jake stood in the empty conference room, wondering what he'd just agreed to. Sophie stirred and opened her eyes. Daddy? Hey, baby. Time to go home. Who was that lady? Jake picked her up, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. Someone who's going to help us for a little while. Is she nice? He thought about the fear in Rachel's eyes, the desperation in her voice, the way her hands had shaken. I don't know yet. The next morning, Jake packed their entire lives into 3 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes. It didn't take long. Their studio apartment was in a building where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought through the walls every night. The rent was always late. The landlord was always threatening eviction. Sophie watched from the bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Are we going on a trip? Something like that. For how long? Jake knelt down beside her. Remember how I told you Daddy has to work really hard sometimes? Well, I'm going to do a special job for the next few weeks. We're going to stay with someone, a lady named Miss Hartwell. The lady from last night? Yeah, and it's really important that you're on your best behavior, okay? We're going to pretend something for a little while. Sophie's eyes narrowed. She was 6, but she was smart. Too smart sometimes. Pretend what? That Miss Hartwell and I are friends, really good friends. Like boyfriend and girlfriend. Something like that. But you're not really? Jake's throat tightened. No, baby. It's just pretend. Just for work. Can you do that for Daddy? Sophie hugged her rabbit tighter. I guess, but I don't like lying. I know, me neither. But sometimes grown-ups have to do complicated things to keep the people they love safe. At exactly noon, a black Mercedes pulled up outside their building. The driver, an older man in a suit named Vincent, helped load their suitcases without saying a word. Sophie pressed her face against the window as they drove through downtown Chicago, her eyes wide at buildings she'd only seen from a distance. Daddy, look! That building is so tall. That's where Miss Hartwell works, baby. Where I work, too. You work in a castle. Vincent smiled slightly in the rear-view mirror. It does look like one, doesn't it? Rachel's penthouse was on the 52nd floor of a building on Lakeshore Drive. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake. The living room was bigger than Jake's entire apartment building. Sophie gasped and grabbed Jake's hand tighter. Rachel was waiting for them, dressed more casually than last night, but still intimidating in designer jeans and a silk blouse. Welcome, Sophie, right? Sophie hid behind Jake's leg. Rachel's expression softened slightly, and she knelt down to Sophie's eye level. I know this is scary. New places always are, but I promise you're safe here, and I think you're going to like your room. I get my own room? Sophie's voice was small. You do. Want to see it? Sophie looked up at Jake, who nodded. She took a tentative step forward, and Rachel stood, offering her hand. After a moment, Sophie took it. Jake followed them down a hallway lined with expensive art. Rachel pushed open a door at the end, and Sophie's jaw dropped. The room was painted soft yellow, with a canopy bed covered in stuffed animals. Shelves full of books lined one wall. There was a small desk with art supplies, a window seat with cushions overlooking the city, and a toy box that was already overflowing. Is this really mine? For as long as you're here, Rachel said. My assistant wasn't sure what you liked, so she got a little bit of everything. If there's something you want that's not here, just tell me. Sophie walked slowly into the room, touching everything like she was in a museum. She picked up a stuffed bear from the bed, holding it carefully. Can I really keep this? Everything in this room is yours. Sophie looked at the bear, then at Rachel, then suddenly ran forward and hugged Rachel's legs. Thank you. Rachel looked startled, her hands hovering uncertainly before gently patting Sophie's back. You're welcome, sweetheart. When Sophie released her and started exploring the bookshelves, Rachel caught Jake's eye. Something vulnerable flashed across her face before the mask returned. Jake, my lawyer is waiting in my office. Sophie, there are snacks in the kitchen if you're hungry. The housekeeper, Maria, will be here in 20 minutes. She has a granddaughter your age and brought some games. The office was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun sat at the desk, a stack of papers in front of her. She stood when they entered. Jake Miller, I'm Patricia Kane, Ms. Hartwell's attorney. She gestured to a chair. Sit. We have a lot to cover and not much time. For the next 3 hours, Patricia walked him through every detail of the plan. Jake and Rachel had met 6 months ago at a charity gala for children's education at the Four Seasons. Rachel had been giving a speech about investing in Chicago's public schools. Jake had volunteered that night, helping with setup in his capacity as a Hartwell Technologies employee. They talked during the cocktail hour about workforce development and opportunity gaps. Rachel was impressed by your insights, Patricia said, reading from her notes. You'd grown up in the foster system, worked your way through community college, understood the barriers that keep people trapped in poverty. She found that perspective valuable. Jake's stomach twisted. I didn't grow up in foster care. You do now. It explains your empathy, your work ethic, and why you're so devoted to Sophie. We need a compelling backstory. Patricia continued. Their first date was November 20th at a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park called Lucia's. Jake ordered the carbonara. Rachel had the seafood risotto. They talked about Sophie, about Rachel's work, about their respective childhoods. The connection was immediate and genuine. You saw each other weekly after that, Patricia said. Always low-key. Coffee shops, walks by the lake, quiet dinners. Rachel wanted to keep it private because of company policy about relationships between executives and employees. You understood and respected that boundary. When did we get engaged? You didn't. You went to City Hall 3 weeks ago and just got married. Spontaneous, romantic. You both knew what you wanted and saw no reason to wait. Jake tried to absorb all the information. Dates, locations, conversations, emotions. It felt like studying for an exam where failure meant losing everything. Patricia pulled out another document. The marriage license is real, filed legally. But you need to understand what that means. You're actually married to Rachel Hartwell. On paper, in the eyes of the law, you are her husband. The prenuptial agreement protects her assets completely. You have no claim to her fortune. The marriage will be annulled when this arrangement ends, but until then, it's legally binding. This seems extreme for a business lawsuit. Patricia and Rachel exchanged a glance. Something passed between them that made Jake's instincts prickle. Derek Townsend isn't just suing for control of the company, Patricia said carefully. He's been systematically working to destroy Rachel's reputation for 3 years, planting stories in the media about her being cold, unstable, obsessed with work, manipulating board members by suggesting she's unfit for leadership, hiring private investigators to dig up anything he can use against her. Why? What does he want? Rachel's jaw tightened. She stared out the window for a long moment before speaking. Derek and I built Hartwell Technologies together. We were partners before we were married. For years it worked, but success changed him. He started cutting corners, making deals that compromised our values. I found evidence he was embezzling, using shell corporations to siphon money from the company we'd built together. So you divorced him. I gave him a choice. Leave quietly with a generous buyout, or I'd go to the authorities. He took the money. Rachel's voice was hollow. But he's never forgiven me for it. In his mind, I betrayed him, chose the company over our marriage. And now he wants me to lose everything the way he did. That's why you're so scared. I'm scared because I don't know what else he has. Derek always has contingency plans. He's been plotting this revenge for 3 years. Whatever he reveals at that board meeting, it's going to be designed to cause maximum damage. Patricia pushed the contract across the desk. Read it carefully. Once you sign, you're bound by its terms. If you violate the confidentiality clause, Rachel can sue you for breach of contract and you'll owe her millions. Do you understand? Jake read through the dense legal language. The payments were clearly outlined. $50,000 within 24 hours of signing. $150,000 upon successful completion of the 6-week arrangement. Sophie's tuition at Rosewood Academy, fully paid for the academic year. Jake's promotion to facilities director, effective immediately, with a salary of $95,000 per year. His hands shook slightly as he signed. This was real. He just legally married a woman he didn't know, agreed to lie to everyone, and bound himself to a situation he didn't fully understand. Patricia collected the papers efficiently. Good. Now let's discuss your public appearances. The board meeting is in 72 hours. Before that, you'll attend a small dinner party Rachel is hosting tomorrow night. Just 4 board members and their spouses. Consider it a dress rehearsal. Tomorrow? Jake's voice cracked. I'm not ready. You'll be ready, Patricia said firmly. We're drilling you on the backstory all day today. Maria will work with Sophie on appropriate behavior for formal events. You'll both have new wardrobes delivered this afternoon. Rachel's stylist is coming at 4. The rest of the day was a blur of preparation. Patricia grilled him on details until Jake could recite their entire fictional relationship without hesitation. A stylist named Marcus arrived with racks of expensive clothes, measuring Jake and selecting outfits that made him look like someone who belonged in Rachel's world. You have good bone structure, Marcus said, studying Jake's face. Strong jaw, nice eyes, but you need a proper haircut. I'm calling Henri. Henry arrived an hour later and transformed Jake's shaggy hair into something styled and professional. When Jake finally looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Sophie was having her own transformation. Maria had helped her pick out a dress for the dinner party, taught her how to set a proper table, and practiced polite conversation. When Jake found them in the dining room, Sophie was carefully arranging napkins while Maria corrected her technique. Like this, Mija, folded to the left of the plate. Why does it matter which side? Because details matter in formal settings. People notice these things. Sophie saw Jake and ran over. Daddy, Maria's teaching me fancy stuff. Jake picked her up. I see that. You're becoming very sophisticated. What's sophisticated? It means fancy and smart. Rachel appeared in the doorway, and Jake's breath caught. She'd changed into a simple black dress, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked softer somehow, less like a CEO and more like a woman. The guests arrive at 7 tomorrow, she said. Margaret Chen, Robert Hayes, Thomas Liu, and Barbara Winters. All board members, all skeptical of my ability to balance work and personal life. We need to convince them we're genuinely happy together. How do we do that? Small touches. Hand-holding, inside jokes, comfortable silence, the kind of intimacy that can't be faked. She paused. At least the kind that's hard to fake. That night, after Sophie was asleep in her new room, Jake stood in his own bedroom, staring at the enormous bed. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Jennifer. "Heard you moved." New address? Jake's stomach dropped. How did she know already? He typed back, "Yeah, got a better place." "Good for you. Send me the address. I want to see where Sophie's living." Jake hesitated, then sent the address. There was no avoiding it. Jennifer had rights to know where their daughter was staying. Her response came immediately. "Lakeshore Drive? How the hell did you afford that?" "My situation changed. We'll talk about it when you visit." "You better believe we will. I'm coming tomorrow afternoon." Jake closed his eyes. Jennifer would arrive right before the dinner party. This was going to be a disaster. He found Rachel in her office, working despite the late hour. She looked up when he knocked. "Can't sleep." "Jennifer's coming tomorrow afternoon. She wants to see where Sophie's living." Rachel set down her pen. "That's actually good timing." "How is that good?" "Because the best way to convince Jennifer this is real is to let her see us together. See Sophie happy. See the life we're building." Rachel stood and walked to the window. "Your ex-wife left you because you couldn't provide the life she wanted, correct?" Jake's jaw tightened. "She left because she met someone with more money, yeah. Then, when she sees what you have now, she'll back off. She won't want the responsibility of full custody if you can provide better opportunities. You don't know Jennifer. She's competitive. She might fight harder just to prove she can. Then we make sure she can't win." Rachel turned to face him. "Patricia's already drafting a custody modification proposal. We'll offer Jennifer reduced child support in exchange for you having primary custody. Frame it as giving her more freedom while ensuring Sophie has the best possible life." "What if she refuses?" "She won't. Because fighting you now means going up against me. Against my resources, my lawyers, my influence. Jennifer's smart enough to know when she's outmatched." Jake wanted to argue, but Rachel was probably right. Jennifer had always been pragmatic, even about motherhood. "There's something else," Rachel said quietly. "Tomorrow night during the dinner party, we need to act like a couple. That means physical affection, touching, casual intimacy. Are you comfortable with that?" "I don't have a choice, do I?" "There's always a choice. But some choices have consequences." She walked closer. "We should practice. Make it look natural." She took his hand, and Jake felt the warmth of her skin. Rachel guided his arm around her waist, stepping into his space until they were close enough that he could smell her perfume. "Like this," she said softly. "Comfortable. Natural. Like we've done it 1,000 times." Jake's heart was racing. This feels anything but natural. "It will." Eventually, but her voice wavered slightly, and Jake realized she was nervous too. They stood like that for a moment, neither quite sure what to do next. Then Rachel stepped back. "Tomorrow will be challenging. Jennifer, then the dinner party. But if we get through it, the board meeting will be easier. And if we don't, then Derek wins. I lose the company, you lose Sophie, and both our lives fall apart." The weight of that reality settled between them. The next afternoon, Jennifer arrived exactly on time. She'd always been punctual, organized, controlled. She stepped out of her BMW wearing designer clothes, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She stopped in the lobby when she saw the building, looking up at the glass and steel tower with calculating eyes. Vincent met her and brought her up. When the elevator doors opened, Jennifer's jaw actually dropped. "Jesus Christ, Jake." Jake and Rachel were waiting in the living room. Sophie was at a play date with one of Maria's grandchildren, giving the adults time to talk. Rachel stood smoothly, extending her hand. "Jennifer, I'm Rachel Hartwell. It's lovely to finally meet you." Jennifer shook her hand, but her eyes were cold. "Rachel Hartwell, the Rachel Hartwell. CEO of Hartwell Technologies. That's right. And you're married to Jake. She said it like she was testing the words, seeing if they made sense. 3 weeks now. Jennifer walked further into the room, taking in every detail. The furniture that cost more than a car. The art on the walls. The view that stretched across the entire city. She picked up a framed photo from the side table, one that Patricia had staged. Jake, Rachel, and Sophie at the park, all smiling. This is quite the upgrade from that studio apartment in Logan Square. We've been fortunate, Jake said carefully. Fortunate. Jennifer laughed without humor. 6 months ago, you were begging me to reduce child support because you could barely make rent. Now you're living here, married to a billionaire. What changed, Jake? I met Rachel. My circumstances improved. Just like that? You meet a CEO at some charity event and suddenly you're living in a penthouse? Jennifer set down the photo. You must think I'm an idiot. Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Jennifer, I understand your skepticism. The circumstances are unusual, but Jake and I connected over shared values about education and opportunity. I saw qualities in him that impressed me. His work ethic, his devotion to Sophie, his integrity. Those things matter more to me than background or wealth. How convenient for him. Yes, it is convenient. He found someone who appreciates him for who he is rather than what he has. I believe that was something lacking in your marriage. Jennifer's face flushed. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know you left when times got hard. I know you fought for custody primarily to maintain child support payments rather than out of genuine desire to parent. I know Sophie talks about you visiting only once a month despite living 20 minutes away. I'm busy. I have a life. So do we. But we make Sophie a priority. Rachel moved closer to Jake, taking his hand, which is why we're proposing a modification to the custody arrangement. Jake will have primary custody. You'll have standard visitation, 2 weekends a month, and alternating holidays. In exchange, child support will be reduced to $500 per month. Jennifer stared. You're trying to take my daughter. We're trying to give Sophie stability. She's thriving here. New school, consistent routine, 2 parents who are present. You know this is better for her. 2 parents, Jennifer repeated. You've known her for what, 3 weeks? And you think you're her parent. I think I'm someone who's here. Every day, reading to her at night, helping with homework, making sure she's safe and loved. Can you say the same? The room went silent. Jennifer's hands clenched into fists. I'm not agreeing to anything without talking to my lawyer. Of course, Rachel said smoothly. Have him contact Patricia Kane. We can work out the details. After Jennifer left, slamming the door behind her, Jake exhaled heavily. That went worse than I expected. It went exactly as expected. She's angry because she knows we're right. Her lawyer will convince her to accept the deal. Rachel checked her watch. The guests arrive in 3 hours. We need to prepare. The dinner party was excruciating. Margaret Chen arrived first with her husband David, a quiet man who taught literature at Northwestern. Margaret hugged Rachel warmly. It's so good to see you outside the office. And you must be Jake. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Chen. Please, call me Margaret. Rachel's told me so much about you. Jake caught Rachel's eye, wondering what exactly she'd said. Rachel just smiled. Robert Hayes and his wife Linda came next, followed by Thomas Liu with his husband Peter, and finally, Barbara Winters alone. Recently divorced, bitter about it. They gathered in the living room for cocktails. Maria served appetizers while Sophie, on her best behavior in a blue dress, offered people napkins. The board members were charmed. She's precious, Linda said. How old? 6, Jake answered. Just started first grade at Rosewood Academy. Excellent school. Our grandson goes there. The conversation flowed easily enough through drinks, but Jake felt the scrutiny. Every touch between him and Rachel was analyzed, every glance evaluated. When Rachel's hand rested on his shoulder, Margaret watched. When Jake laughed at something Rachel said, Robert studied his face. They moved to the dining room for dinner. Rachel had arranged the seating strategically. Jake on her right, Margaret on her left, creating a buffer of friendly faces. During the first course, Barbara spoke up. "So, Jake, this all happened rather quickly. You and Rachel." "When you know," Jake said, echoing his earlier line. "How romantic. Though I imagine the difference in your backgrounds created some challenges." "Barbara," Margaret warned. "I'm just curious. It's unusual for someone in Rachel's position to marry a... What did you do before your promotion?" "I was a janitor," Jake said evenly. "I cleaned this building for 3 years." "A janitor? How egalitarian of you, Rachel." Rachel's jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. Jake's position didn't define him. His character did. "I saw how hard he worked, how dedicated he was to his daughter. Those are the qualities I value." Still, quite the Cinderella story. Or would it be Cinderfella? Barbara sipped her wine. "I'm sure Derek will find it fascinating." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Derek's opinion is irrelevant," Rachel said coolly. "Is it?" "He's making some rather interesting claims in his lawsuit. About your mental state, your obsession with work. Now suddenly you're married with a ready-made family. Some might say the timing is suspicious. Some might say Derek is a bitter ex-husband who can't accept that Rachel moved on," Margaret interjected sharply. "Barbara, this is neither the time nor place. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." "You're saying what you're thinking," Thomas Liu spoke up for the first time. "Not everyone shares your skepticism. I've known Rachel for 8 years. I've never seen her happier than she's been the last few weeks. That's not performance. That's real." Rachel squeezed Jake's hand under the table, grateful. The rest of dinner was strained but civil. Sophie fell asleep on the couch during dessert, and Jake carried her to bed. When he returned, the guests were saying their goodbyes. Margaret pulled Rachel aside. "Don't let Barbara get to you. She's projecting her own failed marriage onto everyone else. The rest of us see what's really happening." "What's really happening?" Rachel asked carefully. "You're building a life outside these office walls. You're letting someone in. That takes courage." Margaret smiled. "Derek's lawsuit is going to fail, Rachel." The board sees through him. After everyone left, Rachel and Jake collapsed onto the couch. "I thought that went reasonably well," Rachel said. "Barbara hates us. Barbara hates everyone. Her vote was never in question. But Margaret, Thomas, and Robert are on our side. That's what matters." Jake looked at her. "You were good tonight." "Natural, like we really were married." "So were you." Rachel paused. "Maybe we're better at this than we thought." Something passed between them, unspoken but significant. The board meeting was the next day. Jake wore his new suit, feeling like an imposter. Rachel was already dressed and in the kitchen when he emerged, on the phone with Patricia. "No, we're not postponing, because showing fear is exactly what Derek wants." "Fine, we'll meet you there in an hour." She ended the call and looked at Jake. "Ready?" "Not even a little bit." "Good. That means you understand what's at stake." She picked up her briefcase. "Sophie stays with Maria." The meeting could go long. The car ride to Hartwell Technologies was tense and quiet. Jake watched Rachel's face, saw the mask sliding into place. By the time they reached the executive floor, she was completely composed. The conference room was already filling with board members. Derek arrived last, flanked by 2 lawyers. He spotted Jake and smiled coldly. "So this is really happening," the janitor playing Prince. "That's enough," Margaret said sharply. "Is it?" "Because I have evidence that this entire marriage is a fraud designed to manipulate this board." The chairman, Robert Hayes, called the meeting to order. "Derek, you have 30 minutes to present your case." Derek's presentation was devastating. Bank records showing the $50,000 transfer. Security footage from the night Rachel caught Jake with Sophie. Timeline analysis proving how quickly everything happened. Phone records showing Rachel and Jake never communicated before that night. Employment records proving Jake's sudden promotion. This isn't a love story, Derek concluded. It's a desperate woman buying herself a family to avoid facing the truth. She's incapable of real human connection. She's obsessed, unstable, and unfit to lead this company. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Even Margaret looked troubled. Robert turned to Rachel. "Do you have a response?" Rachel stood slowly. Jake could see her hands trembling slightly, but her voice was steady. "Everything Derek showed you is technically true. I did transfer money to Jake. We did meet under unusual circumstances. Our marriage happened quickly, but his interpretation is completely wrong." She walked to stand by Jake's chair. "I met Jake 6 months ago, but I didn't really see him until 3 weeks ago. That night in the office, I found someone working himself to exhaustion to provide for his daughter. Someone who understood sacrifice in a way I'd forgotten. I realized I wanted that kind of devotion in my life. Not because I needed to fool this board, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to care about something besides profit margins." "Touching," Derek said. But the conference room door opened. Sophie walked in, holding Patricia's hand. Jake's heart stopped. They'd agreed Sophie would stay home. What was she doing here? But then he realized this was Patricia and Rachel's backup plan. Sophie walked right up to the table, looking at all the serious adults. "Excuse me," she said in her small voice. "Are you the people who decide if Ms. Rachel keeps her company?" Robert smiled gently despite himself. "We are, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Sophie Miller. I'm Jake's daughter, and I need to tell you something important." Derek's face went red. "This is completely inappropriate." "Mr. Townsend, sit down," Margaret said firmly. "Let the child speak." Sophie looked at Rachel. "That man says you and my daddy are pretending, but you're not. Ms. Rachel reads to me every night, even when she's tired from work. She knows I don't like carrots, but I'll eat them with cheese. She taught me how to count to 20 in Spanish. And she makes my daddy smile. He didn't smile much before we moved in with her." She turned to the board. "My teacher says we should always tell the truth. So here's the truth. Ms. Rachel is really nice. She works really hard, and she loves us. I don't know what this meeting is about exactly, but if it's about whether Ms. Rachel is a good person, she is. She's the best." The room was completely silent. Sophie walked back to Patricia, who led her out. After the door closed, Margaret spoke first. "Out of the mouths of babes," she said quietly. She looked at Derek. "You know what I see? A bitter ex-husband trying to destroy a woman who had the courage to leave him. A man so consumed by revenge that he'll manufacture evidence, manipulate facts, and waste this board's time with baseless accusations." "They're not baseless," Derek insisted. "The evidence shows that Rachel made some unconventional choices," Thomas Liu interrupted. "But when is falling in love quickly a crime? When is helping someone you care about proof of instability? I've worked with Rachel for 5 years. I've never seen her happier or more focused. That's not mental illness, that's balance." Other board members murmured agreement. Robert looked at Derek. "Do you have any actual evidence of fraud? Any proof that this marriage was entered into specifically to deceive this board?" Derek's jaw worked furiously. "I have testimony from Jake's ex-wife that the relationship is suspicious. Hearsay from a woman with a financial interest in undermining Jake's credibility." Patricia interjected smoothly. "Hardly admissible evidence." Robert nodded. "Then I move to dismiss this lawsuit and confirm Rachel Hartwell as CEO of Hartwell Technologies." All in favor? 11 hands went up. Only Derek and Barbara abstained. The motion carries. Derek, your lawsuit is dismissed. This meeting is adjourned. Derek gathered his papers, his face mottled with rage. He stopped by Jake and Rachel on his way out. "This isn't over. Not even close. You think you've won, but I've barely started. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts." He stormed out. After the board members left, offering congratulations and support, Jake and Rachel stood alone in the conference room. "We did it," Rachel said quietly. "For now. But Derek's threat, he's just bitter. He can't do anything now. The board's behind me." But Jake saw the fear in her eyes and knew she didn't believe that any more than he did. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Jake found Rachel in her office staring at her computer screen. "You should be celebrating. I should be preparing. Derek's planning something. I can feel it. You beat him today. Decisively. I won the battle. The war's not over." She closed her laptop. "I got an email an hour ago. From an unknown sender. No content. Just a photo." She turned the screen toward Jake. It showed Rachel and Derek from years ago, looking happy at some company event. On the back of the photo, visible in the image, someone had written, "I know everything, and soon everyone else will too." Jake's stomach dropped. What does that mean? I don't know, but whatever Derek's planning, it's just beginning. The next few days were tense. Rachel jumped at sounds, checked over her shoulder constantly. Patricia hired a private security firm to monitor Derek's activities, but he'd gone quiet. No more lawsuits, no more threats. Just silence, which was somehow worse. Jennifer's lawyer contacted Patricia with a counteroffer on custody. Jennifer would accept Jake having primary custody in exchange for $2,500 per month in child support, not the $500 Rachel had proposed. It was clear Jennifer was trying to profit from their situation. "Reject it," Rachel told Patricia firmly. "We offered $500. She can take it or fight us in court." 2 days later, Jennifer accepted. The custody modification was filed with the court. Jake had won, but it felt hollow somehow, like he'd sacrificed something important, even if he couldn't name what. Meanwhile, Rachel's sister Carolyn had been released from the hospital and was staying at the penthouse while she recovered. She was younger than Rachel, with the same dark eyes but a warmer smile. She watched Jake and Rachel together with open curiosity. One afternoon, while Rachel was at work and Sophie was at school, Carolyn cornered Jake in the kitchen. "So, you and my sister?" "Yeah." "How'd you two really meet?" Jake's pulse quickened. "At a charity event. 6 months ago." "Interesting, because Rachel called me 7 months ago and told me she was alone and probably always would be, that she'd accepted being married to her work." Carolyn stirred her tea. "Then suddenly 3 weeks ago, she calls saying she's married. To a man she never mentioned, with a ready-made family. You can understand why I'm suspicious. Your sister is private. She doesn't share everything. She shares things with me, or she used to, before the accident." Carolyn looked at him directly. "I don't know what's really going on between you two, but I know my sister. She's terrified of being vulnerable. If she's letting you in, even a little bit, it's because she sees something in you that makes her feel safe. I'm not using her, if that's what you're asking. That's exactly what I'm asking. Because if you hurt her, if this is some scheme to get her money, I will make your life hell. It's not about money. Then what is it about?" Jake thought carefully about his answer. "It's about two people who needed something from each other, and maybe found more than they expected." Carolyn studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. "Good answer. Vague enough to be meaningless, but sincere enough that I almost believe you." That night, Rachel came home late. Sophie was already asleep, and Carolyn had gone to bed early. Jake was reading in the living room when Rachel came in, looking exhausted. "Long day?" "Investor meeting ran late. They wanted reassurance about the Derek situation." "What did you tell them?" "That it was handled. That I'm focused on the company's future, not personal drama." She kicked off her heels and sank onto the couch beside him. "I'm so tired, Jake. Tired of performing. Tired of proving myself. Tired of looking over my shoulder waiting for Derek's next move." "Then stop performing." "Just be." "I don't know how to do that anymore. I've been wearing masks for so long I've forgotten what my real face looks like." Jake set down his book. "Your real face is the one I see when you're reading to Sophie, when you're talking with Carolyn, When you think no one's watching. Rachel looked at him, and something cracked in her expression. Earlier today, I realized something. In the middle of this investor meeting, fielding questions about stability and leadership, I thought about coming home, to you and Sophie. And for the first time in my life, work wasn't enough. I wanted to be here more than I wanted to be there. Is that a bad thing? It's terrifying, because it means I'm starting to need you. Need this, and I've spent years building walls specifically to avoid that feeling. Maybe it's time to let the walls come down. Rachel studied his face. Can I ask you something? Honestly? Always. If this arrangement ended tomorrow, if I gave you the full $200,000 and told you to leave, would you? Jake thought about it. Really thought about it. About Sophie's laughter in her new school. About the way Rachel softened when she looked at his daughter. About how he'd started looking forward to coming home to her. No, he said quietly. I don't think I would. Why not? Because somewhere between the pretending and the real, this became my life. You became part of my life. And I don't want to go back to how things were before. Rachel's breath caught. Jake, I'm not saying I love you. We barely know each other. But I'm saying I want to know you. Really know you. The person behind the CEO mask. For a long moment, Rachel just looked at him. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. Not the careful, performative kiss they'd shared at public events. This was real. Desperate and real and full of everything neither of them could say. When they pulled apart, Rachel was crying. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. What if we fail? What if this whole thing falls apart? Then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have been honest with ourselves about what we wanted. Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, no more pretending. At least, not with each other. They sat together in the quiet of the penthouse, holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers were discovering that sometimes the best things grow from the most complicated beginnings. The calm lasted exactly 4 days. On Monday morning, Rachel's phone rang at 6 a.m. Jake woke to hear her voice, sharp with panic. When? How bad? I'm on my way. She hung up and started dressing frantically. The police are at Hartwell Technologies. Someone broke into my office overnight. They took files, hard drives, everything. What kind of files? The kind that could destroy the company if they got into the wrong hands. Financial records, merger plans, patent applications. She grabbed her keys. This is Derek. It has to be. Call Patricia. Don't go alone. I'm the CEO. I have to be there. Jake threw on clothes. Then I'm coming with you. At Hartwell Technologies, police cars blocked the entrance. Detective Sarah Chen was already on scene, interviewing the night security team. She looked up when Rachel and Jake arrived. Miss Hartwell, your security team called it in at 5 a.m. The intruder knew how to bypass your systems, which suggests inside knowledge. Derek, Rachel said immediately. My ex-husband. He used to work here. He'd know the security protocols. We'll investigate all possibilities. In the meantime, I need a list of everything that was taken. They went up to Rachel's office. It had been ransacked. File cabinets emptied, computer equipment torn out. Even the safe behind the painting had been opened. Rachel's face went white. That safe required a 6-digit code that only I knew, and it's been emptied. What was in it? Detective Chen asked. Rachel didn't answer immediately. Patricia arrived and pulled Rachel aside, whispering urgently. Finally, Rachel spoke. The safe contained documents related to my divorce from Derek Townsend, including evidence of his embezzlement from this company. I've kept it as insurance in case he ever tried to come after me again. Detective Chen's expression sharpened. You had evidence of a crime and didn't report it? It was part of our divorce settlement. He agreed to leave quietly. I agreed not to prosecute. That could be construed as covering up a crime, Ms. Hartwell. It was a private settlement. That's not how the law works. Detective Chen closed her notebook. I'm going to need to bring you in for questioning. Officially. Jake watched as the situation spiraled. Patricia was arguing with the detective, explaining about confidential settlements and statute of limitations. But it didn't matter. Derek had found a way to turn Rachel's protection of him into a weapon against her. At the police station, they separated Jake and Rachel. Jake sat in an interrogation room for 2 hours before Detective Chen finally came in. "Mr. Miller, I have some questions about your relationship with Miss Hartwell. We've been through this already. Things have changed. See, I spoke with your ex-wife this morning. She had some interesting things to say about how quickly your circumstances improved, about a $50,000 payment you received from Ms. Hartwell the day you moved in together." Jake's stomach sank. That money was a gift. Was it? Or was it payment for services rendered, specifically for agreeing to pose as her husband to deceive her board of directors? That's not what happened. Then explain the timeline. You meet Miss Hartwell by chance when she catches you breaking company policy. Hours later, you're married. Days later, you're promoted from janitor to director. Weeks later, you're living in her penthouse with your daughter enrolled in an expensive private school. You see how this looks. It looks like my life got better. It looks like fraud, marriage fraud, corporate fraud, and possibly conspiracy to conceal evidence of embezzlement. Detective Chen leaned forward. "Here's what I think happened. Derek Townsend was embezzling from Hartwell Technologies. Rachel found out, but instead of reporting it, she covered it up to protect herself and the company. Then, when Derek filed his lawsuit, she panicked and hired you to play her husband. Everything else is just story to cover the truth." "That's not. I spoke to building security. They have footage of you and Miss Hartwell the night you first met. Want to know what it shows? Her cornering you when you'd brought your daughter to work illegally. Her pulling you into her office for over an hour. You leaving, pale as a ghost, an hour later. That doesn't look like romance. That looks like coercion." Jake's hands clenched. "She gave me a choice." "Did she?" "Because it seems like she gave you an ultimatum. Cooperate or lose everything. That's not a choice. That's blackmail." The interrogation continued for hours. They asked the same questions in different ways, trying to trap him in contradictions. Jake stuck to the story, but he could feel them closing in. Finally, they let him go. Patricia was waiting in the lobby. "Where's Rachel?" Jake asked. "Still being questioned. They're talking about charging her with obstruction of justice for not reporting Derek's embezzlement, and possibly conspiracy to commit fraud for your marriage arrangement." "Can they do that? If Derek's lawyer convinces them it was all a scheme to deceive the board and investors?" "Yes." Patricia's face was grim. "This is what Derek wanted all along. Not just to take Rachel's company, but to destroy her completely. And he's using you to do it." Jake felt sick. "How do we stop this?" "I'm working on it. But right now, you need to go home. Be with Sophie. Let me handle this." At the penthouse, Maria had Sophie doing homework at the kitchen table. Sophie looked up when Jake came in. "Where's Mom?" Jake's chest tightened. Sophie had started calling Rachel Mom naturally over the past few weeks, and neither he nor Rachel had corrected her. Now that simple word felt like a weight. "She's at work, baby, dealing with some complicated grown-up stuff. Is she okay?" "She will be." But Jake wasn't sure he believed that. Rachel didn't come home that night. Patricia called at midnight to say Rachel had been released but was staying at a hotel, working with lawyers to prepare her defense. Jake lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The next morning, every news outlet in Chicago had the story. CEO accused of covering up embezzlement, Hartwell Technologies scandal deepens, billionaire's marriage called into question. Jake's phone exploded with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, all wanting his side of the story. Sophie saw the news at breakfast. Maria tried to change the channel, but it was too late. "Why are they saying mean things about Mom?" "Because sometimes people lie to get attention," Jake said carefully. "But she didn't do anything wrong. We know that, and we're going to prove it." Patricia called at 10 a.m. "I need you and Sophie at my office in an hour. The prosecutor wants to interview Sophie." "Absolutely not. I'm not putting her through that." "Jake, They're going to question her with or without your cooperation. At least if you're present, I can protect her." The interview was gentle but thorough. A child psychologist asked Sophie about her life before and after moving in with Rachel, about whether anyone had told her what to say, about whether she felt safe and happy. Sophie answered honestly. Yes, she was happy. Yes, Rachel was nice to her. No, no one had made her lie about anything. Afterward, the psychologist spoke with Patricia privately. When Patricia emerged, she was smiling slightly. The psychologist's report will say Sophie is well-adjusted, happy, and shows no signs of being coached or manipulated. That helps our case significantly. What case? I thought Rachel was being accused of obstruction. The prosecutor is considering multiple charges. Obstruction for not reporting Derek's embezzlement. Fraud for your marriage arrangement. Conspiracy to deceive investors. They're building a case that could send Rachel to prison for years. Jake felt the ground shift beneath him. Prison? If they can prove criminal intent, which is why we need to prove the marriage is legitimate, that you and Rachel genuinely fell in love, regardless of how it started. How do we prove that? By being honest about everything. Patricia looked at him seriously. Jake, if you're called to testify, you'll be under oath. You need to decide right now. Are you going to lie to protect Rachel? Or are you going to tell the truth and hope it's enough? Jake thought about Rachel. About Sophie calling her mom. About the way Rachel's face softened when she read bedtime stories. About the kiss they'd shared that meant more than any contract. I'll tell the truth, he said. All of it. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. Rachel finally came home 2 days before, looking exhausted and defeated. Sophie ran to her immediately. Mom, you're home. Rachel picked her up, holding her tight. Hi, sweetheart. I missed you. I missed you too. Daddy said you were working, but I knew you were sad. Are you okay now? I'm better now that I'm with you. After Sophie went to bed, Rachel and Jake finally talked. Patricia told me what you said, about telling the truth. I won't lie under oath. Not even for you. I know, and I'm not asking you to. Rachel sat on the couch, looking smaller somehow. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what started this, about the choices I made. Rachel, I blackmailed you, Jake. I threatened your job, your custody of Sophie. I forced you into a situation where you had no real choice. That was wrong. You were desperate. That doesn't make it right. She looked at him. If you want to walk away now, take the money and leave. I'll understand. I won't fight you. Jake sat beside her. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. What matters is what's right. Then I'm staying. Because what's right is being honest about what this became. Yes, it started wrong. Yes, you forced my hand. But somewhere along the way, it became real. And I'm not abandoning my family just because things got hard. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Your family. Yeah, you're my family now. You and Sophie. And family doesn't bail when things fall apart. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and full of fear. When they pulled apart, she was crying. I'm so scared, Jake. Of losing everything. The company, my freedom, you and Sophie. I've never been this scared in my life. Then we'll be scared together. But we'll fight. And we'll win. The hearing arrived too quickly. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and Hartwell Technologies board members. Derek sat in the back, smirking. The prosecutor presented their case efficiently. Evidence of Derek's embezzlement that Rachel had hidden. The suspicious timeline of her marriage to Jake. Testimony from Jennifer about the sudden improvement in Jake's circumstances. Bank records showing the $50,000 transfer. The evidence shows a pattern of deception, the prosecutor concluded. Rachel Hartwell covered up a crime, then manufactured a fraudulent marriage to protect her position when that crime threatened to surface. She exploited an employee in a vulnerable position, using his desperation to her advantage. This is a clear case of fraud and obstruction of justice. Patricia's defense was equally strong. She presented character witnesses who testified to Rachel's integrity, financial experts who explained that the $50,000 was clearly a personal gift, not payment for services. The child psychologist's report on Sophie's well-being, board members who affirmed their support for Rachel as CEO. Then Patricia called Jake to the stand. Under oath, Jake told the truth. All of it. How Rachel had cornered him that night, the ultimatum she'd given him, the contract they'd signed, the arrangement that was supposed to last 6 weeks. The prosecutor pounced. So Ms. Hartwell did blackmail you into this arrangement? At first, yes. She forced my hand. And you agreed because you were desperate and had no choice? I agreed because I saw an opportunity to provide better for my daughter. So it was a business transaction, not a real marriage. Jake looked directly at Rachel. It started as a transaction, but it became real. Somewhere between the pretending and the performance, we actually fell in love. Not because the contract said we had to, but because we couldn't help it. How convenient that you fell in love after signing a contract worth $200,000. The money didn't make me fall in love. Sophie calling her mom did. Rachel staying up all night when Sophie had a fever did. The way she fought to protect me even when it would have been easier to let me go did. Those are the things that made it real. The prosecutor pressed harder, but Jake didn't waver. Yes, the arrangement had been wrong. Yes, Rachel had forced his compliance. But what they'd built from that flawed beginning was genuine. When Patricia rested her case, the judge took a recess to consider. They waited in a conference room, Rachel pacing, Patricia reviewing notes, Jake sitting quietly. Finally, they were called back. The judge looked tired. This is one of the more unusual cases I've encountered. Ms. Hartwell, you made serious errors in judgment. Covering up Mr. Townsend's crimes was wrong. Coercing Mr. Miller into this arrangement was wrong. However, the evidence suggests that while your methods were questionable, your current relationship is genuine. Mr. Miller's testimony was compelling and credible. Rachel's hands clenched on the table. I'm dismissing the fraud charges. There's insufficient evidence that you intended to deceive anyone beyond the initial arrangement, which appears to have evolved into a legitimate marriage. However, I am referring the embezzlement matter to the district attorney for review. You may face obstruction charges related to your failure to report Mr. Townsend's crimes. The judge looked at Derek, who'd gone pale. Mr. Townsend, I'm also recommending that the DA investigate your activities, breaking and entering, industrial espionage, and the original embezzlement allegations. You may wish to retain counsel. After court, outside on the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. Patricia handled them while Jake and Rachel escaped to the waiting car. In the back seat, Rachel finally breathed. It's over. Not quite. You still have the obstruction issue. Patricia thinks she can negotiate that down to a fine. Derek's the one facing real charges now. Rachel took Jake's hand. Thank you for telling the truth, for standing by me. I told you, we're family. That's what family does. 2 weeks later, the DA declined to prosecute Rachel for obstruction. The statute of limitations had expired on Derek's embezzlement, making her failure to report it a moot point. Derek, however, was indicted on multiple charges: breaking and entering, theft of corporate documents, and securities fraud from his current company. He was facing years in prison. The board of Hartwell Technologies issued a statement of full support for Rachel. Jennifer signed the final custody papers without further argument. Carolyn moved into her own apartment but visited weekly for family dinners. Life slowly returned to normal. Or rather, to a new normal. Rachel still worked long hours, but she came home for dinner. Sophie thrived at Rosewood Academy. Jake discovered he actually enjoyed being facilities director. 6 months after the hearing, Rachel came home early with a surprise. Pack bags. We're going away this weekend. Where? Somewhere we can get married. Again. For real this time. Sophie overheard and squealed. Another wedding? A real one, Rachel said, kneeling down. With family and friends and vows we actually mean. They went to a small inn in Michigan, just the 3 of them, plus Carolyn and Patricia. On the beach at sunset, with Sophie standing between them holding both their hands, Jake and Rachel said vows they'd written themselves. "Jake," Rachel said, her voice steady, "6 months ago, I cornered you in a conference room and made you an impossible offer. I forced your hand because I was desperate and scared. That was the worst thing I've ever done. But somehow, impossibly, it led to the best thing in my life. You taught me that strength isn't about being alone. It's about letting people in, about being vulnerable enough to love and be loved. I promised to spend the rest of my life earning the second chance you gave me." Jake's voice was thick with emotion. "Rachel, you saw me when I was invisible. You gave Sophie and me not just opportunities, but a family. Yes, it started wrong. Yes, you forced my hand, but I'm grateful every day that you did, because it brought me here, to you, to us. I promise to stand beside you through everything, to share your burdens and celebrate your victories, to choose you every single day." Sophie pulled on Rachel's dress. "Can I say something?" "Of course, sweetheart." Sophie looked very serious. "I just want to say thank you for being my mom, and thank you for making my daddy happy, and thank you for teaching me that families can be lots of different things, but the best kind is when people choose to love each other." There wasn't a dry eye on the beach. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Jake and Rachel stood on their room's balcony watching the moon on the water. "We really did it," Rachel said softly. "Built something real from something fake. Best transaction I ever made." She laughed. "Is that what this is? A transaction? The best kind? One where everybody wins?" Rachel leaned against him. "I never thanked you properly. For that night in the conference room. For saying yes when you could have walked away. I couldn't walk away. Not once I saw the fear in your eyes, the desperation. I recognized it because I felt it too. And now I don't feel desperate anymore. I feel home." They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way. What began with a threat in a conference room ended with a family on a beach. What started as a lie became the truest thing either of them had ever known. A year later, Jake stood in Rachel's office. Their office now, he'd been promoted to chief operating officer, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Behind him, Sophie was doing homework at the conference table while Rachel worked at her desk. "Daddy?" Sophie looked up from her math. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you glad Ms. Hartwell caught you that night, when I fell asleep at work?" Jake glanced at Rachel, who'd stopped typing to listen. "Yeah, baby, I'm glad. Even though you were scared. Especially because I was scared. Sometimes the best things come from scary moments. You just have to be brave enough to see where they lead." Sophie nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. Rachel caught Jake's eye and smiled. They'd come a long way from that midnight confrontation, from fear and desperation to love and family, from a 6-week arrangement to a lifetime commitment. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been straightforward, but it had been real. And sometimes real is messy and complicated and starts in all the wrong ways. But if you're brave enough to see it through, it can become something beautiful. Jake's phone buzzed with a news alert. Derek Townsend sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. He showed it to Rachel, who read it and nodded. "Good. He can't hurt anyone else now." "Do you ever think about him? About what he took from you?" "Sometimes. But mostly I think about what I gained. You, Sophie. A real life outside these walls." She stood and walked over. "Derek wanted me to lose everything. Instead, I found everything. That's the best revenge." Sophie looked up again. "What's revenge?" "Something we don't need anymore," Rachel said, kissing the top of her head. That night, the three of them had dinner together like always. Sophie told them about her day at school. Rachel shared a funny story from a board meeting. Jake talked about a problem he'd solved with the building's HVAC system. It was ordinary, mundane, perfect. After Sophie went to bed, Rachel and Jake cleaned up the kitchen together. She washed, he dried. moving around each other with the comfortable familiarity of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. "I've been thinking," Rachel said as she handed him a plate, "about expanding the company, opening a new division focused on workforce development and education. Following through on those values you mentioned in our fake origin story, making them real. Using the company to create opportunities for people like you, people who just need a chance. I think that's a great idea. You're not biased?" "Completely biased. Doesn't make it less true." They finished the dishes and moved to the living room. Rachel curled up against Jake on the couch, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. That night, saying yes, every day, she stiffened. "What?" "I regret that you were desperate enough to have to ask. I regret that I was desperate enough to say yes. I regret that Sophie had to be part of something she didn't understand." He kissed her forehead. "But I don't regret where it led us. Not for a second." Rachel relaxed again. "Good answer. I've gotten better at this marriage thing. We both have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Two people who'd started as strangers, bound by a desperate arrangement that became something neither expected: home. The pretending was over. This was real, and it was everything. So, that's the end of our story. I really hope a piece of it stays with you. If there was a moment, or even just a character that really hit home, I'd honestly be honored to read about it in the comments. It's just amazing to see how one story can land in so many different ways. Look, if you believe stories like this are a kind of light we need in the world, your support means everything. When you like and subscribe, you're doing more than just helping a channel grow. You're really casting a vote for stories that aren't afraid to look at what makes us human, and you're helping that light find someone who might be in the dark. Thank you for lending me your time. It means a lot. Until the next chapter, take care of yourselves and each other.